This second video is basically about crime within fiction. And the first question is from Rudrani Kadiala, and it is, what inspired you to become a crime writer? Well, initially, Rudrani, I set out to write spy fiction, partly because at the time I'd been reading a lot of books in that genre. Books by Eric Ambler, Graham Greene, Len Deighton, John le Carré and Gerald Seymour. And I still do read spy fiction. Helped me to get to sleep at night when work was particularly traumatic. At the moment, it helps me to get to sleep during the coronavirus lockdown. I can't get enough of Mick Herron's tongue-in-cheek Slough House series, for example. In fact, my first novel, Code Word Metro, was about an international terrorist attack during the opening of the Channel Tunnel. Written in 1 hour a day over 6 months in 1993, it involved intelligence agencies as well as French and British police forces and predicted the rise of Islamic terrorism. Despite serious interest from the publisher, Cassell, it was never published. The reason for that is that while I was laboriously revising it on an electronic typewriter, I discovered that the agent to whom I'd been referred by the publisher had probably shared the plot with someone else. The day before I was ready to submit, I walked into W.H. Smith on Deansgate in Manchester and picked up a book that appeared to duplicate my plot in its entirety, with not much more than a change of names for the characters. The upshot was that with my day job becoming more all-encompassing, I didn't attempt another novel until my retirement 13 years later. By which time I was now reading a lot of crime fiction. One of my colleagues had introduced me to Ian Rankin and the brilliant Rebus series. Another colleague pointed me towards Donna Leon's cultured and stoical Commissario Brunetti. And then I discovered for myself, long before he became popular, Andrea Camilleri and his laid-back Ispettore Montalbano. But it also helped that I had 4 generations of Metropolitan Police officers behind me. My great-grandfather, Detective John McCarthy, was a station sergeant in the East End. My grandfather, Detective Inspector William Wood, was a founding member and one time head of the flying squad. My father was a PC during the day and an air raid warden during the night throughout the Second World War. And my sister was a WPC until a brick in the face during a battle between Teddy Boys and residents during the early Notting Hill riots persuaded her that it was time to get married and raise children instead. You could say I was the one that got away. And I have to admit that DCI Tom Caton is the detective I would have liked to have been had I gone down the same path. I've got lots of reminders of my ancestors around me as I write. I've copies of my grandfather's will and letters charting a lengthy dispute over farmland that he owned near Listowel, the writer's town in Ireland, long since lost to squatters' rights. And this is actually a picture of him as Churchill's bodyguard at the infamous Sydney Street massacre. This is him here, and this is Churchill. And up here on the top is a guy sat on the roof with his hands up, desperate not to become involved in the melee. And this is another one of him, possibly in one of the many disguises he used to gather information. And this is my father's police helmet, the year he was invalided out, the year that Queen Elizabeth acceded to the throne. And actually fits me quite well. The next question is, what is it about crime that interests you? Well, Rudrani, I grew up immersing myself in Sherlock Holmes and Dennis Wheatley, and graduated to Agatha Christie before discovering spy stories and more classical literature. And I suppose the things that attracted me then as a reader and still do as a writer are those that I think explain why a third of all books purchased and read in libraries are crime novels. Crime fiction is a form of escapism, but one to which we can relate because it tends to be based on reality. We're not required to suspend our disbelief as much as we might be expected to with a thriller, a fantasy, a scientific or a dystopian novel. The protagonist, usually a professional or an amateur detective, is a real person with flaws and foibles just like the rest of us. We can relate to them, we can empathise with them, walk alongside them and see things through their eyes. We live vicariously through them without any of the real danger that confronts the guardians of our law. And then there is the insight that these novels provide into the guts of a police investigation. Nowadays, there are so many real-life documentaries about the day-to-day life of police officers and even detailed accounts of actual murder investigations that readers look critically at the way in which police procedure is portrayed in fiction. That creates a challenge for us writers. We have to strike a balance between boring the pants off our reader with too much procedural detail and leaving them incredulous at the way in which the crimes are solved. Crime novels also excite us because of the essential element of mystery. I love having to create that air of mystery and the challenge of ensuring that it's both sustained and not removed too soon. And of course, there is the thrill of the chase, of winkling out and hunting down the perpetrator, and the satisfaction of a credible resolution. And finally, crime fiction provides the opportunity for me to explore important themes, such as human slavery, sexual exploitation, physical and emotional abuse, corruption in public office, right-wing extremism, honour killing, racism, sexism, and all of the other isms, together with all of the things that help to explain man's inhumanity to man, and woman's too, such as jealousy, greed, and the thirst for power. I enjoy all of the research that's involved in exploring these themes, even when it means having to get inside the minds of a psychopath or watching an autopsy online.